Jen. Wow. Okay, if you can find your way back to Jen, another slide. That's fine. That's because we've come back to Zoom. So that I think is where we were. Okay. Hopefully this is all working okay for everyone. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay in the room? Excellent. What a pleasure to be talking in G6. This is like my life 20 years ago. Sorry, not 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but I was over there. So this is very, very exciting to be in the Institute of Archaeology, and particularly exciting to be asked to come and talk about a subject very dear to my heart, which is the Thames, the archaeology of the foreshore, and in particular, the evidence that we have for fish and fishing on the river. So that's what we're going to be looking at this evening. Just a little bit by way of context to set the scene. We're starting with this beautiful image of a find from the Museum of London, was previously on display in the Medieval Gallery. And it was discovered in Barnes, I believe, on the foreshore, dates to around the 6th or the 7th century. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight is the evidence for medieval fishing, but we are going to touch on the periods before and after the medieval period as well. So hopefully this is also working, which we did test before. Let's try doing it that way. Okay, we're going to be using that. For those of you that I haven't met before, I now work for the National Trust, as Harvey said, and I help to look after properties in Kent, Sussex and Greater London. From 2008 to 2018, I worked on a project called the Thames Discovery Programme, which is now part of Museum of London Archaeology. They are still a community archaeology project that examines the foreshore of the River Thames. So the wet bit in the middle between low and high tide. So when the tide goes out, groups of enthusiastic volunteers, like you can see here on the foreshore at Greenwich, go out and record structures. So they're doing something a little bit different from mudlarking. They're not specifically looking for artifacts. We were particularly interested in structures that are exposed on the foreshore and recording the evidence for how people have used the intertidal zone through time to provide transport infrastructure, to provide access to the river, and to utilise the resources of the Thames. So this is the site. So never let it be said that projects set up by Gustav Milne do things by halves. Our site area was the intertidal foreshore within Greater London. So broadly speaking, from Richmond down to the Thames barrier was the area that we focused on. The Thames Discovery Programme followed an earlier project during the 1990s, which was called the Thames Archaeological Survey, which is a project I also worked on with Mike Webber, John Binns, and again was directed by Gustav Milne. So it's an incredible archaeological site for those of you who haven't visited. You have a quick show of hands in the room for anyone who's been on the Thames foreshore. Excellent. So I'm speaking to the converted then here this evening, and I'm sure at home as well, lots of people who are really familiar with this amazing archaeological site. The longest archaeological site well, certainly in London, but perhaps in the whole of the UK, and really an incredible resource. So as I said, I worked on the project until 2018. In 2017, which was the coming up to the 10-year anniversary of the project, we published this book called The River's Tale. And there's a chapter in The River's Tale about fish and fishing. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight, we have previously published in this now sadly out of print book. Sold out really, really quickly. I keep emailing Mola and saying, please, can you redo a reprint or put it online as a PDF because it's quite old now. So fingers crossed, maybe they will do that one day. So we are going to start in the prehistoric to think about how the river was used during prehistory for fishing. And actually, it's a really interesting period to think about in terms of utilising the river as a resource for food because the evidence is quite sparse. We're starting here with a quote from Rudyard Kipling from his poem The River's Tale. And I really, really like this quote because it builds that picture of how the river might have been perceived in the prehistoric period and the kind of resources around that. And at the bottom, you can see we've got the prehistoric person or man, he netted my salmon. So we're going to have a little quick look at the evidence for fishing in prehistory. The image on the other side of the slide is a cigarette card from the 1930s and is definitely one of my favourite images of Thames activity. Clearly represents a very bad day for someone on the Thames because they're out in their logboat having a lovely time and they've managed to drop not only the Waterloo helmet but also the Battersea Shield on their way back in. So marvellous and well done to them. So there is, as I said, less evidence for fishing on the prehistoric river. So although the river must have been full of fish, archaeologically, we only have limited evidence for their exploitation from the Mesolithic up until all the way up at the Iron Age. So we do have occasional examples of harpoons like this one. Those have been found at Battersea and Wandsworth. An intriguing example of a possible fishing related artifact is this, which was found on the foreshore at Chelsea by me, actually, and Mike Webber. In a rather surprise turn of events, we were down monitoring the foreshore at Chelsea, and we had the remains of a prehistoric land surface eroding out at Chelsea. So timbers, bits of tree, also artifacts, so ceramics, lithics, and human bone and animal bone also coming out on this site. We'd previously recorded this particular feature actually as part of that natural environment, as part of a tree. And when we were down visiting one day, we realized that it was actually a modified artifact. So it's about this big. It's got a handle a bit like a baseball bat, and the bottom of it is shaped like a cricket bat. Dates to the Neolithic period and has been variously described as a club, as a beater. So it is certainly a made artifact. It is not natural. There's a variety of interpretations for this particular artifact. So one is that it could be used for textile working. So it does look quite similar to textile beaters. There has been some fantastic experimental archaeology undertaken to see what impact an implement like this would have on a human skull. So if you're imagining a kind of Flintstones scenario with someone waving a club, knocking things or people on the head with it, it would have worked. That has been academically demonstrated. And it's also been referred to as what's called a fisherman's priest. So similar to the idea of knocking people on the head with an artifact like this, you could also have used it if you were pulling fish out of the river. And sorry, this all got rather graphic really early on, beating them to death basically on the foreshore. So we don't know exactly what it was used for, but it is potentially the kind of artifact that you could have used in a fishing related context in the Neolithic period. It was on display in the Museum of London, in the London Before London gallery, alongside a replica that had been made by Damien Goodburn. I'm really hoping it will go back on display in the new museum when it opens, but we will have to wait and see. So, I mean, really, the evidence for prehistoric fishing is surprisingly sparse. What we do have, however, is slightly more evidence for, and this is the first use of the R word this evening, for potential ritual activity relating to fish. Now, these are some words from John Cotton, who I'm sure you're all really familiar with, and hopefully John is watching at home. Hi, John, quoting you here. So this was part of the work that John did for The River's Tale, looking at the deposition of pike bones in Iron Age context. So they're in ditches in funerary context. You can, I believe, eat a pike. I don't think they taste particularly nice, but they are edible. But it, as John concludes at the bottom there, they seem to have had a special status within these sort of funerary contexts. So we're not seeing fish bones coming out of sampling of prehistoric deposits to the best of my knowledge. And I'm really happy to be updated on this as well, because it's a few years since I've looked at sort of prehistoric fishing. But it is very interesting to think that that is a resource that is literally on your doorstep in London in the prehistoric period and doesn't appear to be regularly utilised, apart from pikes in these sort of more ritual contexts. So definitely one to look out for in the future. There's some further research that would be interesting to carry out on sites in future. We do have possible evidence on the Thames foreshore for structures associated with fishing in the Bronze Age, in the Iron Age periods. We're looking here at a picture from Vauxhall. This is the I'd like to say the very famous Vauxhall Bridge, sort of located just near the MI5 or 6 building. I always forget which one it is. This is quite an early picture of it from the Thames Archaeological Survey in the 1990s. So it is subject to change and erosion. And I don't know how it's looking actually after all the tideway work, sticking well out, Jane says. This structure was also the subject of a time team investigation in the 1990s. Now, this has been described as a bridge, possibly a jetty. It might have been a bridge to a now disappeared island in the river. I think it's really unlikely that it ever crossed the entire sort of span of the river in the Bronze Age, because it would have been very wide at this point. But the reason that we're looking at this image is in the 90s, when this was first being recorded, there was a second smaller structure very close by this one that returned an Iron Age date. And the interpretation of that small structure was that it was some sort of fish trap or fishing related infrastructure. It has subsequently eroded away. So we cannot say very much more about it other than the records that we have from the 90s. This is the sort of one of the suggested reconstructions for that Vauxhall Bronze Age structure, is that it is a platform for ritual deposition of artifacts. Equally, I could see someone sitting on the end of that with a fishing rod and fishing. So, you know, it gives you access to the river potentially for a variety of different things. And fishing will leave a lot less evidence than throwing lots of lovely swords and spears and things into the river, which have been recovered in the area of the Bronze Age structure. Moving upriver to Fulham. This image was taken by Andy Chopping from Museum of London Archaeology and shows recording underway on 3 small posts. They're wrapped in hazard tape so that you can hopefully spot them in the foreshore. These 3 posts also returned Iron Age dates. Now, 3 posts does not a very convincing structure make. They are quite small, and we do still have a monitoring group, the Fulham Foreshore Recording and Observation, or FROG group, which is led by Julia Mahon, who continue to monitor this area of the foreshore. One suggested interpretation for 3 small posts is that they are some, like the Vauxhall feature, they are something to do with fishing. So whether they represent the remnants of a structure or a small intervention in the foreshore is really unclear. This photo was taken probably, 2010. One of those posts has subsequently washed out and eroded away in 2022. And I am indebted to Julia and the continuing effort of the Fulham Frog, who keep me in touch as well with what they're doing. They continue to monitor the 2 surviving posts there. and we're going to be looking at some of their other updates a little bit later in this lecture. So they're still there, they're hanging on. So moving into the Roman period, we obviously start seeing the evidence for fish processing in waterfront excavations. So we can tell from archaeology undertaken on the waterfront, obviously we have decades of material information about this now, that they are eating fish, they are processing fish. Have we a problem? Oh dear. I've talked quite a lot already as well. It'd be hard to catch everyone up. What do we need to do? Oh, sharing slides. Do we need to do share screen? Don't worry, if you're listening at home, I have lots more slides, like lots. What's the share screen thing? Don't know. Yeah. That's what they're saying. You are screen sharing. Oh, okay, we've got a thumbs up. It's there. Okay. Just don't look there. Okay. 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 All right.
Really, really sorry.
Sorry, everyone. You missed some pictures of muddy timber in wood in the foreshore thus far, and there'll be plenty more of those to come, I promise. Okay. So, this also means that I have no notes as well, because the notes are on the presentation. So we're going wild and free with all of this now. So if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me immediately. We are looking here at some of the excavations at Peninsula House in the 1980s, I believe this was. Now, they had a deposit there, which they've actually described as the fish deposit. So there was so much evidence for fish processing at this site, and particularly the production or the use of garum. Has everyone heard of garum, which is a particularly revolting kind of fish sauce, I believe? I've never tried it. So in the Roman period, we know that they're definitely utilizing resources to the point where they are having to process. They have a site where they are processing and manufacturing fish-related goods. Oh, this is quite discombobulating now. Oh, which thing is working as well is the question. Can't get the slides to move on now. If I do that, can everyone at home still see? No. Yes. We're still sharing.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone. Let me see if it will move on now. It's moving on, so that's a good start. Can everyone still see, though?
Can you do a thumbs up at home if you can see a picture of a ruinous city of London?
I don't know how we tell. Do we have to go back to... Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
What are we going back to?
We're going back to there. And that one, yeah. We do, oh God. Can we do a thumbs up at home? I don't know how we even tell. Everyone's on tenterhooks to find out what comes next, right? Right?
Loads of thumbs up.
Excellent. Okay, so
keep going.
Okay, so we're just not going to touch anything at this point and hope that it's all working. So we're looking at a picture of the ruinous city of Londinium after the Romans have gone home. They've packed up, they've gone away. Can everyone see that at home? I'm going to hope that that is all okay and everyone is now seeing the same thing. I can't remember what the point was that I was going to make about this. Excellent, loads of thumbs up about this ruinous city of London. Fish and Peninsula House. So this was just to set in context the transition from the end of the Roman period and into the early medieval period, so previously known as the Dark Ages. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with that transition. So the Roman city is essentially, as far as we are aware, abandoned, and the settlement during the early medieval period is focused around the area of the Strand and Westminster. So we have this ruined city left in the early decades of the 5th century. Oh dear God. It really won't. I'm pressing all the buttons and now this does not move on. Okay, if I do that again and go there. I don't know how we know if anyone at home can see the slide moving on, but I'm hoping that they can. Okay, we're at Putney. Is everyone at home seeing Putney? Please God, tell me everyone at home is seeing Putney.
I think we assume they are.
Okay. All right. This is going to make for a fantastic recording. Really excited about this. So we're at Putney, and the reason that we're at Putney is because of the sterling work of the Wandsworth Historical Society. The Wandsworth Historical Society have been monitoring their foreshore in Putney for over 50 years now. So they discovered the remnants of this structure that we're looking at here in the 1970s. This is part of a fish trap structure, and this is really the part of the lecture where we're going to be looking at lots of little bits of wood that are quite hard to spot on the foreshore. So my apologies if anyone came tonight hoping for really, really pretty pictures and very televisual kind of things. It's wet wood in mud. That's what we're looking at. You can see we've got a line of posts running down the foreshore there. They also discovered some evidence for surviving wattling. So what we're looking at here is part of a barrier structure. It did return radiocarbon dates early in the Saxon period. So this is our earliest example of a dated structure from that late Roman, early medieval sort of crossover period. So in the early medieval period, on the foreshore in Putney, they are building a long line of posts with wattle hurdles placed between to catch fish on the foreshore. We have around a dozen or so examples of early medieval fish traps surviving on the intertidal foreshore, which is an incredible survival given their fragility and given the sort of rarity of those kinds of structures. We're going to have a look at pretty much all of the dated examples that we have. So this is your spot the fish trap test. If you were out on the foreshore at Crabtree Wharf, which is in Hammersmith, being extremely careful on a very muddy and quite dangerous bit of foreshore. This is where we almost lost a molar surveyor and their kit. The kit was, I should note, rescued first before the sinking surveyor. We were recording in advance of some development works to one of the piers, the foreshore here. Can you see the fish trap posts? They are helpfully outlined here with little red dots with a start and end to the feature that we saw. So again, early Saxon dates, and again, seems to be a single line of posts here. Now, obviously on the foreshore, we always have to account for or allow for the fact that we might be not seeing the whole structure because the river is doing the excavating for us. It is eroding out as it wants to. This is not a sort of targeted, controlled program of excavation, but certainly with a long structure like this one, we couldn't see any other posts that went with it at this time. These sorts of structures really highlight the need for regular monitoring of the foreshore because we don't know what changes are happening unless someone physically goes and looks. They are only exposed generally on the very lowest of tides. If you have a very heavy fall of rain, you're not going to see them, and you really need to aim for a 0.5 and below low tide to have a chance of being able to see some of these structures. So we're going to move through the early medieval period with the accompaniment of the Queen Hithe mosaic, because I think it frames nicely some of the things that we're going to be looking at, and also because it features lots of fish on it. So you can see at the bottom here, the period we've been talking about, the abandonment of Londinium, the creation of the Middle Saxon wick or emporia, and you can see along the bottom there we've got eels, glass, yellow, and so on. Moving back to Fulham, where we had the evidence for those 3 Iron Age posts, we also have evidence from the early medieval period. Now, obviously, Fulham is a really significant site in the early medieval period because it is the London home, it is the Bishop of London's home. Bishop of London, isn't it? Yes, it is. So here you can see Elliot Ragg, who was the field officer for the Thames Discovery Programme, taking a sample of this fragment of a wooden plank that you can see. And can you see it's got lots and lots of cut marks on it? This return dates in the 7th century, and the suggestion is that this is a sort of ad hoc processing site, so that someone is cutting something up on this piece of timber on the foreshore. And a logical thing that they might have been cutting up on the foreshore is fish. So we're counting it as one of our fishing related artifacts. These are some photos from Julia, which she just sent in the July of 2024. So this is demonstrating once again that value of continuing the monitoring process. So very close to some of the dated timbers that we have from the Fulham foreshore, we have more material continuing to erode out. So we've got, sorry to point, and I'll try and see if I can point for those at home. No, I can't. But hopefully on the further slide, the largest one, you can see the remnants of some sort of brushwood structure. And we've also got elements of twine. This is all going on in this lecture, isn't it? Elements of twine, or possibly flax, she thinks, eroding out as well. So we don't have an interpretation for this as yet. I'm really hoping that the Thames Discovery Programme are able to help support the frog in terms of understanding a little bit more about what is going on here. This is clearly a really significant site. Moving back to Vauxhall, so we're jumping all up and down the river at the moment, but we're trying to do them in roughly chronological order. So here you can see we've got 2 lines of posts, or hopefully you can see it. Here is Elliot and Neville looking for the 2 lines of posts in order to survey them. So this is a double line here at 9 Elms, so a slightly different form of technology being used, and a slightly later date. So we're moving 6th and into the late 7th century sort of date range. And we have a nice illustration here of that erosion process. So this is the initial survey in 2009. And then when we went back in 2016, you can see how much more exposed these structures are. So it's possible, as I mentioned earlier, that we're looking at only half or a partial part of this structure, because what we know about those double line of posts is that they tend to be associated with V-shaped fish traps, which is what we're going to look at next. You might also note that discoveries of the wattle hurdling are much rarer than the discoveries of the posts themselves. So moving upstream, right up through Hounslow to Isleworth, where we have a really good surviving example of a fish trap. Again, moving slightly later into our early medieval period. Now, where the bird is standing is kind of the open mouth of one of these V-shaped fish traps. So the open end is facing downstream in this instance. So it is presumably sited on the foreshore here to catch fish that are coming upstream. One of the really interesting questions about these structures is whether they are meant to function as tidal structures or not. So the debate around where the tidal head is through time is particularly pertinent to these structures, because Isleworth is a very, very long way west. So if the tidal head in the early medieval period is all the way up at Isleworth, that is, Jane is shaking and she would know. She's saying no, so I'm going to go with Jane's opinion here. So it is interesting to think about how these structures work if they are in a fully sort of fluvial environment, and how people also, if it's not tidal, how they're accessing them. So what kind of vessels they're using. Really interestingly, in the case of this structure, we do have an associated causeway of the same date. So there must be something available to walk on. So in terms of what the heights of the river are, what the range of the tidal range is a really, really interesting question here. And now we come to Chelsea. Now, you're not meant to have favourites, really, are you, of sites? But Chelsea and Greenwich are my two favourite sites on the Thames foreshore. I'm going to have two because I'm greedy, but this one is spectacular. This is our best surviving example of an early medieval fish trap. Over 70 sort of stakes surviving. It lies in front of the houseboats in the bay at Chelsea, for those of you who know that area of the foreshore. Date range 730 to 900. Really interesting that Chelsea is a really significant site in the early medieval period. It's the site of ecclesiastical councils, it's the site of royal meetings. So the suggestion is that this is something, a piece of infrastructure that must also work with a wider estate, so that they are looking at provisioning a lot of people. So there is resource that has gone into building this fish trap structure. The open end of this V faces the other way from the Isleworth one. It faces upstream. So they are potentially trying to catch different species of fish to what they are looking to exploit at Isleworth. Now, this one is only visible, as I said, on the really, really low tides. If you do plan to visit it, a word of warning. This is a super difficult site to access. The nearest gate is quite often locked. You do otherwise have quite a long walk. And you can see the area behind the archaeologists. It's kind of like that. So these are not archaeologists. They have not been trained with the Thames Discovery Programme. These were gentlemen who took a nice walk on the foreshore after an evening in the pub and had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. So that is at Chelsea. It drops away behind the fish trap. It must have been dredged, I think, in the past. I do not own the credit to this image. This is from, I believe, the Evening Standard, as was. So when we talk about these V-shaped structures, this is the kind of structure we are talking about. This is a reconstruction by Essex County Council showing what kind of, what a V-shaped fish trap would look like. So you have the two lines of stakes with wattle hurdles between them. They've also suggested we've got a walkway to access, and then it all feeds into a big wicker basket at the end. So the fish come in, you trap them in there, and then you take them out. They are a technology that continues for a very, very long time. It's a really good example of something that works extremely well, and you see them throughout the medieval period and into the sort of early modern period as well. So they are very useful kind of infrastructure. You can also see from the amount of material that's gone into this, just coming back to that point about estate management, we're looking at potentially structures that would need managed woodland nearby in order to be able to provide all of this material for the uprights, for the wattle hurdles, for the causeway, and for the basket infrastructure as well. Now, Chelsea being Chelsea, we don't have just a fisherman's priest. We don't have just one early medieval fish trap. We actually have two early medieval fish traps on the site. So the second survives less well. It is very close in date to the first that we have looked at. So it may be that we're looking at a substantial fishery here. And you can see here Bob Cowie being very, very safe on the foreshore, recording the second fish trap there. So moving through into the Alfredian period and the resettlement within the walled city of London, we have fewer fish traps dating from this period. The two examples that we have from this later period are from Greenwich. So the Greenwich foreshore has the scheduled monument, which includes part of the Tudor jetty. We also have another very large, probably 17th century jetty. And within the timbers of that 17th century jetty, right at the bottom of the foreshore, are the remains of one fish trap. And then slightly further downstream, we have the remains of a second. These are really rarely seen. And you can see here at the bottom of the 17th century jetty, some of those smaller timbers are not part of that 17th century infrastructure. They have been dated and they've returned these early medieval, late Saxon dates. So it is, it's really interesting to think about this progress of where we're getting these fish trap structures, so further out into the estuary. And then we have one final example of another dated early medieval series of timberwork from that 9th century period from Fulham. And in this case, it is one of those wattled hurdles, which dates to the 10th century. So we've almost come sort of full circle. We come back to West London. We're almost on the opposite foreshore from Putney, where they found those very early medieval timbers. I've just remembered why we were looking at a picture of the ruined city of London. It's because we've got a really late Roman fish trap on the foreshore at the Tower of London. I do apologise, I was thrown there. So essentially we have a continual tradition right the way through that late Roman transition into the early medieval period of fishing infrastructure, including surviving wattled hurdles. Now, obviously, you can use wattled hurdles, which are basically like fence panels, for a variety of different things. But when you find them in an intertidal context, really the most likely interpretation is that they are some part of a fish trap. We have seen these in other places. So these are examples from Surrey Docks. The one with the red and white scale was seen in 2009. The one on the right-hand side was seen in 2018. And I'm indebted to Alan Murphy, who's a Thames mudlark, for keeping us informed about these structures being exposed. And also to Rollo Sparks. I don't know if you're here or watching online. Thank you very much for posting a picture just last week on the Thames Mudlarking Facebook page of another wattled hurdle, again from that kind of Surrey Docks area. So we're going to look at Surrey Docks. I have no idea what the time is, by the way, so I'm just going to carry on. All right, okay. We will be returning to Surrey Docks subsequent, but we're just going to carry on with the theme of wattled hurdles for a little bit. This is a picture from Mortimer Wheeler's investigations on the Thames up in West London at Brentford and Isleworth. And here you can see a really lovely preserved example of one of those wattled hurdles. Now, he interpreted it as part of a hut floor from the Roman period. Far be it from me to disagree with Mortimer Wheeler, but I'm going to. I think he's wrong. I think it is part of a fish trap. It doesn't work as well for me as a floor. And he was obviously trying to interpret all of the different things he was seeing as late Roman structural remains that had subsequently been flooded, as opposed to something that was actually a riverine structure. But we may never know. Ivanhoe Hume also in 1955 saw similar kinds of exposures on the foreshore again at Isleworth. And all the way back into the Victorian period, this is part of Montague Sharp's recording works on that West London stretch up near Brentford and Isleworth, lines and lines and lines of stakes and posts recorded in the river. Now, his interpretation was that they were some sort of defensive structure or network in place to stop invading hordes, whoever they may have been. It is equally possible that they represent the remains of fishing structures. So, fish traps, being the exciting things they are, can tell us all kinds of different things. They can tell us about the different methods of construction, whether they're barriers, those sort of long lines of posts, whether they're V-shaped, They're giving us potentially information about the tidal regime, environmental conditions. They're giving us those little insights into land management organization, development of estates, the longevity of that technology, and the exploitation of a resource, fish on the river. In the 90s, for the Thames Archaeological Survey, we actually had a little go at building our own fish trap on the foreshore at Chiswick. And there's, if you've got all the materials to hand, you can emplace them relatively quickly, even if you're a bunch of students from UCL out on a day trip. We do know as well from archaeological excavation a little bit about the kind of vessels that were in use on the Thames during the early medieval period. Logboats are quite often just assumed to be sort of prehistoric artifacts. They are not always prehistoric. We do have dated examples from the early medieval period, and Damien Goodburn there is sitting in a reconstruction of the Clapton logboat, which dates to around the 9th century, I believe. As we move into sort of later in the Saxon period, we also start getting documentary references as well. So we're looking here at a quote from Aelfric's colloquy from the late 10th, very early 11th century, and a description of a fisherman's life. So if you've not read Aelfric's colloquy, I highly recommend it. It's very interesting. And it's a series of interviews with people who undertake different roles or jobs or tasks. So here he's talking to a fisherman and he's asking him, how do you go about your day-to-day business? And he says, I get in my boat and I go out and I catch all of these different kind of things, and then I sell as much as I can. It's really interesting that he doesn't refer to tending his fish trap, going out and taking his catch. He's talking about a much more sort of mobile activity where he's casting into the river and fishing from a vessel. We're into the period of the Wick, the Emporia, and we're looking at a reconstruction of the beach market here. So we're looking at an increasingly sort of urbanized central part of London, reflected obviously in the increase in the amount of archaeological evidence that we have through this period. What we do know is that in the early medieval period, they're extremely skilled in working with wood. So we know that they are building fish traps. We know that they are building vessels. We also know that they are building buildings from the surviving waterlogged evidence. This is from the waterfront excavations at Bull Wharf. And here you can see the recycled timbers of a late Saxon building reused in a waterfront revetment. And here we can see a reconstruction of that building. So I'm labouring the point really to say in the early medieval period, they're good with wood. And that's, reflected in their fish traps. So we can see we've got one of the V-shaped fish traps actually represented on the Queen Hithe mosaic. And we're just sort of moving through to that 11th century period. And it's this point that we seem to have a transition in the technology. We seem to see a reduction in the use of those fixed fishing structures and a move more towards fishing from vessels. Really interesting that this is reflected very clearly in the archaeological record. We don't have any dated examples of those fixed fish trap structures beyond the kind of 9th and 10th centuries. And there's been a fascinating piece of research undertaken by David Orton and James Barrett looking at cod and suggesting that there is a shift away from exploiting river species to sailing out into the sea and using more of the resources from sea fish stock rather than river fish stock. And that is also reflected in a change in ship technology as well. We've also got later evidence from sort of moving through into the, I suppose, the high medieval period, where we've actually got strictures against the emplacement of traps in the Thames because they are becoming an obstacle to river traffic. So this is some work undertaken by James Galloway. This is a paper that is available online. And it appears that as these urban centres are growing, we are seeing that the routes of navigation are being much more needed for navigation than they are for shipping. So we don't have those dated medieval and early post-medieval fixed structures. So they seem to be shifting towards a more portable regime. We've got the development of Billingsgate from the early 11th century. So we have a site that is dedicated to that processing and resale of fish. And we could also have a look at the kind of iconography that goes along with early medieval fishing. So this is one of the 12th century windows in Canterbury Cathedral. And if you zoom in, you can see in the 12th century depicted fishing, which some frankly terrified looking fish being caught in the net there. There are a few more sort of medieval illustrations just to sort of reiterate this point really about that shift into seine net fishing rather than fishing from fish traps. So here we're looking at a 14th century illumination. You can see again catching fish from a vessel. Not unique to the UK either. So we can see this. This is a French illustration, fishing with a rod, very close to a dangerous-looking bridge. We've got the Luttrell Psalter here, which has this beautiful depiction of those sort of putchers or wicker baskets within a small channel of the river. And so it goes on. But what we are not seeing is depictions of fixed fish trap structures. We're seeing much more use of nets and of vessels. This is reflected to a certain extent in the collections of the Museum of London as well. So we have, this was some information that was provided by John Clark a number of years ago, over 100 medieval artifacts associated with fishing in the Museum of London, including net sinkers and eel spears. So there's a second example of an eel spear at the Tower of London, and things like fish hooks and so on as well. And as we move through sort of woodcut illustrations and so on, you can see again those activities being depicted. This is a 15th century woodcut. Pardon me, there's been a recent paper in the London Archaeologist by Lucy Granger looking at this collection of 15th century lead net sinkers or weights held in the museum's collections. And we do have a surviving example of a wicker portable fish trap or basket. There are literally no prizes for guessing where this was found at all. And this is also in the Museum of London's collections now and was on display in the Medieval Gallery. Hopefully, again, will go back on display. So the last sort of few slides of this talk, we're going to look at some examples of wicker surviving baskets, because the Thames foreshore, we have everything. So we do have a number that we can talk about. So we're going back to Surrey Docks, which is where we have the highest concentration of wicker baskets been discovered. And we're also going to be popping over briefly to the Isle of Dogs, where we have our only dated surviving fragment. So again, this was first recorded by a mudlarker. This is Nick Stevens here, cleaning and exposing the remains of a basket fragment from the Isle of Dogs, dated to the early part of the 15th century. However, as I said, though, it's really Surrey Docks in Rotherhithe where we have an amazing collection of wicker baskets. So this is what they look like when they're first discovered, and then when they're cleaned, you can see just how, well, beautiful they are, really. Very fragile artifacts, though. You can imagine these are not going to survive long in the sort of erosive regime of the Thames. So we have lots of them, as I said. Another one here, another one here, a big fragment here, and one that's still sort of sat up and surviving. So with the Thames Discovery Programme, we did a fieldwork session with our frog volunteers and cleaned and recorded as many as we could in 2017 to try and capture a record of them. We did take some samples, but unfortunately none of them dated. So we don't actually know whether we're looking at medieval examples of basketry here. We also don't know whether they are in situ, as in whether they were actually being used in this place or whether they are just the remnants of. But again, we have lots of sort of illustrations that give us these ideas. I like this chap who's basically wrestling a fish into his very own fishing basket. Now, the reason that I sound a note of caution as to whether all of these are medieval or not is that we had another example, again from the Isle of Docks, which returned a Victorian date. So the lifespan of, again, like the fish traps, the wickerwork baskets are a really common technology. If you can make a basket, you can make a basket, and you can make them all the way from prehistory right the way through to the Victorian period. So without that scientific dating, we can't say for sure that all of those baskets on the Surrey Docks foreshore are medieval or not. And by the time we get into the Victorian period, we have items like that actually being represented in engravings and prints and so on. So we know that the technology remains very similar. So, as I said, for Surrey Docks, we don't know why we've got this huge concentration. There are about 30 or so been recorded to date, and I'm sure more will continue to be exposed. We don't know whether it's a particularly good place for fishing at a certain period of time, or literally whether it is somewhere where you dump your basket when you're done with it. So, coming to a very modern analogy, I do wonder whether we're looking at a kind of shopping trolley type disposal area in Surrey Docks. And we did, I should add, with the Thames Discovery Programme, we did also used to note the locations of shopping trolleys just because I find it interesting. As you move into the Victorian period, obviously the river becomes more and more disgusting and less likely that you're going to want to eat any fish that are caught in it. We did work on a project with the Zoological Society of London, looking at Victorian fishing through documentary references. So fantastic community project that mapped fishing families and the movements of those fishing families east and west of the central part of London and how long they were able to sort of survive. Some really interesting results that came out. There was a lovely blog about it on the Thames Discovery Programme website, but I don't know if it's made it through to the new Museum of London Archaeology site. So I just wanted to finish really with some suggested sources for places that you can find out more. So a lot of what I've talked about tonight, information is available online. I'm obviously very happy to answer any questions. Hopefully this hasn't been too chaotic. So I'd just like to say thank you for Lamas for inviting me to come along and talk tonight. Thank you. Any questions from the floor while I look at the technology? Yes.
Some of these structures have been there for so long, and they're made out of metal.
So because they are in anaerobic conditions and they're waterlogged, they're surviving because they don't get regularly exposed. So as soon as they are popping out of the sort of muddy deposits, you can see on some of the timbers that they become more rounded, so they basically start to erode, and eventually, as the soft deposits around them erode away, the timbers will pop out. So it's a bit like a wobbly tooth, if you imagine that. So as what's around it sort of decreases, it wobbles and wobbles, and eventually they pop out. I mean, I haven't managed to make it down on a low tide for a while to sort of do a health check on some of these, but I have noted all the really good lows for February and March with the intention of getting out and just having a look and seeing how, because we have this amazing sort of data set and we need to see whether it's still there essentially. So you're very welcome. Yes.
So I was part of Laura Barron's Citizen project down on Sandwich Bay.
Yeah.
We recorded over thousands of posts. We were very disappointed that none of them were many. They were all 8, etc.
Right.
And there was all history. Someone whose dad had a fish trap on the beach at Sandy Bay. So it's clear a very bright history. What I don't understand is how, if it's non-tidal tide, how it would work with an open beach facing down. It's all around Sandwich would be faced off the beach, so the fish go into its target.
I defer to my learned colleague.
I missed the start of the question, and the people at home have said, can we repeat the questions from the floor? Because they can only hear things being talked into the machine. So can you repeat the question?
The first one said that Sandwich has got a lot of post-medieval fish traps on porch on the beach. But the question was that given that tidal fish traps work by collecting the fish on the falling tide, and you expect a river to be facing upstream, how did the Isleworth trap work non-tidal and facing downstream?
Okay, so the question was, how did the Isleworth fish trap work if it was non-tidal and it was facing the wrong way for functionality? The answer is, at that date, particularly the early end of that date range, I would be extremely surprised if it was tidal. It was pointing...
Open end is pointing downstream.
Pointing downstream.
So it's trying to catch things that are coming up. Maybe salmon swimming up is what we thought.
Yeah, because nothing will be coming up on the tide, because I genuinely don't think it can be tidal there. So it would only be things that were swimming against the freshwater flow downstream. It's possible that it was built in the wrong place. The Romans built a number of their quays in the wrong place. So it can't have worked logically, because that's such a long way. The tidal head doesn't come back through the city of London until happily into the Saxon period. So I don't think it would have got that far upstream, because the rate of sea level rise at that point wasn't that fast. So it's possible it didn't work.
Do we have any other questions? Christine?
One of the two posts that Fulham looked like as if it's been shaped. Was that just erosion? Was it actually shaped? Or was it a reused piece of wood? All the others looked just like straight.
Yeah. So the question from the floor was, some of the posts at Fulham looked like potentially they had been shaped. So were those posts shaped deliberately, or was it erosion that caused that shaping?
So from memory, they were shaped. The top of them as well, because we sawed them to take a sample, is definitely shaped. That was shaped by us. The reason that they look rounded is because they're eroding. So as the exposed bit that's sticking out, it's washed.
Fallen off, hadn't
Yeah.
it? And then the sapwood, I think, fell off.
It is.
What happens when they stick out, and when you have a bit that is exposed and submerged and exposed and submerged, it necks.
Yeah. For those at home, we're waving our arms around.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, people online are saying, great talk, went to a TDP event with Nat at Greenwich, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh.
We've got no questions that I can see with the online. Yes, here we go. Can we link any of the fish traps to the religious houses along the Thames?
Bishop of London's residence, yes. Chelsea Ecclesiastical Council's not a monastic house.
Greenwich.
Greenwich.
Greenwich. The King Alfred gave the land to his daughter, who married Baldwin of Ghent, who gave the
Abbey of
land
Ghent
to the friars of St. Peter and Paul at Ghent.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so possibly
that might work, because the date looks right.
Yeah, the date is probably right for now. It's earlier than Sion, I think.
They're all earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Greenwich one would work.
Greenwich would work, yeah. It may, it is interesting. I mean, we don't have a lot of. We've got Southwark Priory, but we don't have a surviving fish trap. There were some potential Roman timbers, and there were some potential 12th century timbers from memory from the Southwark foreshore, sort of in front of St Mary Overy, Southwark Cathedral. I don't know that they've ever been fully understood exactly what they were and what they represented. Trying to think of other riverside.
You might, sorry to interrupt, but you might think also of the big Roman site close to Winchester Palace.
Yeah.
Clearly, you know, a very major site there. That, and obviously the foreshore has been affected by erosion.
Yeah.
But there are items on it, and I would think fishing for that, providing resources, quite likely for a huge military complex.
Definitely. So, the Roman period's really interesting actually for this sort of discussion around fish and fishing, because generally speaking, apart from Roman artifacts that are coming out of the city and sometimes at Greenwich, places like that, we don't have a huge plethora of dated Roman structures from the foreshore. We have lots of early medieval, we have lots of later medieval, post-medieval, Victorian, obviously, with lots of prehistoric, very, very little dating from the Roman period. We have a Roman, late Roman fish trap that was on the Tower of London foreshore. It's gone. We have the sort of crossover structures at Putney, those sort of early dated features. And I think there was also another early one, Barn Elm. But we don't have a lot of Roman sort of infrastructure surviving, Roman dated infrastructure surviving on the foreshore, which is interesting in itself, given that they were clearly using the river. So that's definitely something that would be worth knowing, you know, more about, and really good to get dates on stuff.
The point you made, Nat, on that. I mean, if you've got waterfronts right in front of the city and you've got a lot of boats coming in all the time, it's exactly the sort of problem you were referring to in later periods.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want these guys down there who could well interfere with the landing and taking off of goods. So
it's interesting that we're not seeing it any further out or further down, though. You would have thought you might see something at Greenwich, because we know that the Romans are there, or you might see something at, you know, further up in West London. But yeah, it's Shadwell as well would be another site where you would have thought you might get Roman.
Oh, sure.
No, not masses.
Okay, so we're out of questions online. So perhaps Harvey, you might close the proceedings.
right, okay, thank you. Well, let me just get up here. Matt, thank you very much indeed. I was expecting a good lecture, but I have to class that rather higher. But it was very, very good. I thought it was introduced a whole lot of very innovative information. I mean, it shows the great need, and I think tribute must also be given to those who thought of how much must be done on the foreshore before this evidence does actually disappear. And again, from your talk tonight, it's clear that stuff that has been found has eroded further or gone away since. And obviously, when you think about it, fishing and the Thames are going to go hand in glove for many, many millennia. I think you were quite right about the Wheeler find from Brentford. It was, I think a lot of these things would make much more sense as making use of the river for catching fish. But on behalf of us here, and obviously on behalf of the audience at home, thank you very much. It's always good to see you here, and I'm sorry about the technological problems, but I think you and Jane worked through that pretty well. Excellent. They're probably sitting comfortably with a glass. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much, Nat, for coming here and for delivering an excellent talk tonight. Thank you.
I think I'm going to have to trust Paul next. We'll see if we can work it out.
Yeah, excellent. No, it's very good. I mean, it's a whole new world. really should have been looked at.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for being so forbearing. We'll try and get it better next time. But now we're back in here. We had a good audience in the room, and we'll try and make sure we get it all sorted out next time. We were trying running off a laptop rather than off the module. So we'll give it a go and hopefully see you next month. I'm going to close the webinar now. So, cheerio.
I know they're not doing very well.